Hey everyone, you may be asking, where's the show? Well, YouTube does not like us that much. We only post the wacky news stories here, things that are less controversial. If you want all the other topics, and I think you know what I'm talking about, you have to listen to those on other platforms. We still stream live. We stream live on Twitch, Float.app, and DLive, and those are at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, and then 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. As always, you can download the audio-only podcast for free. You can check the description in this video or go to obdmpod.com. The shows march on. We haven't stopped. It's just we have stopped uploading full shows and streaming to YouTube. Thanks, and here's another wacky news segment. So the main witness, along with 7 other campers, had been punished by their camp counselor and were forced to retire early. The counselor was supposed to be keeping an eye over them, but soon left to watch a late-night basketball game. The bed faced a large screen window where they could see the trees and the sky when suddenly a round light appeared, blinking on and off. Finally, the UFO passed out of view. 5 minutes later, 2 more UFOs appeared, blinking and going in different directions as well as up and down. Soon, they disappeared from view. Additional witnesses now saw 5 glowing, blinking lights. These also soon disappeared. Soon, most of the witnesses left the main witness, Paul Geller, where they were gazing out the window when suddenly, without a sound from seemingly anywhere, a bright, luminous object, circular, disc-shaped in appearance, was above the trees. It was about 100 feet away. 5 lights in a circular clockwise configuration surrounded the disc. The main witness was paralyzed as his eyes stayed glued on the UFO. As he lay on his bed, something almost indescribable occurred. Instead of seeing a milky white glow underbelly of the aerocraft around him by 5 white glowing lights, this picture was replaced by superimposed by like a cutaway, a view of the inside of the UFO. So he was initially seeing like the underside of the UFO, but it materialized or like was intangible and lowered down on top of him. Next thing he knew, he was inside the craft, almost like a cutaway. He said it was like watching a movie. The witness noticed that the UFO had a circular viewing screen. Surrounding the viewing screen was a circular control panel. Sitting in 2 large bucket seats next to each other and facing the viewing screen were 2 operator occupants, 2 Sasquatch-type creatures, 2 Bigfoot flying the UFO. They were about 9 to 10 feet tall, had golden tan, orange, long, shaggy fur hair, long arms and legs, stooped shoulders, and pink circular objects around their eyes. The 2 Bigfoot wore goggles that covered about 3/5 of the pink circles around their eyes. Each Bigfoot grasped and clenched a narrow rectangular control bar protruding approximately 2 feet out of the floor. In unison, each pumped the 2 bars that were level to the floor like an organ pedal, up and down again, over and over, as they watched the witness on their view screen. The Bigfoot closest to the witness pointed very slowly and then turned 90 degrees so he could face the person that was laying face down. He had the appearance of a super intelligent orangutan, according to the witness. He had a huge mouth with 2 long fangs protruding from the upper jaw. The witness could see piercing blue eyes through the clear goggles. The witness formed what he termed an incredible mind link with this Sasquatch, although the witness doesn't say what was produced from this mind link or telepathy. The second Bigfoot, the one further away, was staring at the witness through the main view screen, watching him lying on his bed. He continued to pump the long, narrow bar in and out of the floor with his huge pink fist. Suddenly, a visual connection was terminated between the person lying on the bed and the other Sasquatch that was looking at him. he was again staring at the glowing undercarriage of the UFO. 2 seconds later, the craft disappeared without a sound. So there you go. There is UFO, but not only was it a UFO, it was Bigfoot's big feet operating the UFO. 1957.
I'm curious how were they operating it? Because it sounds like they were cranking an old railroad hand cart.
That's what it seemed like. They had like these. Everything seemed super mechanical. It didn't like what was described there wasn't like outlandish technology. It all seemed kind of ordinary. So it was kind of confusing. But that's what he observed, and that's what he felt. And
now you know the rest of the story.
We don't know the rest of the story because we don't know what happened with that telepathic mind link. We don't know what happened.
I like the idea of the transparent UFO you could kind of see through. So
that's not an uncommon story.
Yeah, Wonder Woman's jet.
Something like that. It's Woman's jet. That's not uncommon with abduction scenarios. There are oftentimes people during an abduction scenario, they will say, these entities just materialized through the wall and they came and grabbed me and then they took me through the wall as well. As soon as like you create some sort of physical bond with these entities, you're in their dimension now and you're intangible and you can just walk through walls at that point. So it's a super convenient way to travel. Don't got to worry about doors or handles or anything like that. This next story is from Corpus Christi, Texas, 1966. The witness was camping near a lake with a fellow scout. At night, he was suddenly awakened by splashing noises and a strange odor. He looked out of his tent. He looked out of his tent door and saw a bright light gliding over the lake, sucking up water. It was curious, but frightening at the same time. He lay face down and watched the light move over the water. Worried, he tried to wake up his tent partner, but could not get him awake. He then moved back to the tent door, but stopped quickly when he saw what he described as a two-legged, hairy monster. He backed away from the door, but could still see their images because the light was now closer. He doesn't remember much more except that he was having an unending sort of dreams, and those dreams of being pulled into the lake and emerging inside a cavern under the lake. That's what he remembers from the dream. But there, he said that there was air. It was hard to breathe, and he could see moving shadows. He woke up, soaked in sweat, or it was lake water. He couldn't remember. He was scared every night to sleep since then, as he knows that the dreams were much more vivid than he would have normally in dreams, and they just wouldn't stop. The witness believes that he was abducted, but he can't prove it. He had medical problems ever since the encounter by the lake. So there you go. And that was reported by the Newfork, Nuforc. So I guess a Bigfoot, hairy kind of creature outside of his tent. But the most peculiar thing to me in that was that the UFO was sucking up water, which is a very common thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that.
Like I see a lot of those reports in Southern America. In South America, there's a lot of reports of UFOs sucking up water. Also curious, he was taken to an underground cavern. I want to call that inner earth or hollow earth. Who knows? Probably to some sort of dimensional holding place, I would assume. But he got out of that one alive. So now, as I read all these things, like I kept going deeper and deeper, and I had to buy a book to just try to wrap my head around some of this stuff. There are instances where there was a guy that was just out camping. He was out camping and doing a little bit of hunting, and as he was just going about his day out there, he saw a deer that was injured by an arrow. And he spent like a day or two tracking this deer to try to help it. And so he finally got up close enough. He was able to kind of slow it down and capture it to remove an arrow. And so he wound up removing the arrow from the deer and let it go. At which point in time, that hunter sat down on a log and to just try to enjoy nature. Next thing he knows, out of the corner of his eye, he sees a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, about 20 to 30 feet away, just behind a tree, kind of peering out, looking at him. The guy didn't really freak out that much. He kind of felt calm, and he said the Bigfoot just slowly approached him. And the guy sitting on the log didn't really feel frightened at all. And he said that he could feel some sort of mind link. Like they were sharing thoughts telepathically. The Bigfoot sat down on the log, and the guy claimed that they had a conversation for about 2 hours. And what he initially said is that the Bigfoot was terrified of humans, and he was the first human that the Bigfoot had witnessed help an animal as opposed to just kill it. And so he's traditionally, he and other Bigfoot, very wary of humans because they only know humans to kill. And he figured this might be a good time to approach the one human that he saw save another animal's life. And according to this gentleman, they had a telepathic communication for about 2 hours, but he didn't go into detail about what it was. And I spent hours looking for that interaction to see if I could find any more details about that. And I couldn't find anything. And so it could be just a bunch of bunk. I didn't see any other things. I searched quite a ways, up and down, all over the internet. I even used Yahoo. And
oh my God.
I couldn't find anything.
The horror.
But
it's really interesting with these Bigfoot sort of things. They can walk through walls, no doors, and then they can also communicate telepathically. That's really rad. That would save so much time.
Well, it does. I think that there are different species, and you can't confuse one with the other. Like we have a lot of abilities in the first world here that people in the third world just simply do not have. Now, I'm not talking like we're not like telepathic, but we have technological abilities. So I think confusing Bigfoot piloting UFOs, you shouldn't confuse those guys with the run-of-the-mill people in the woods. Completely different things.
What you're not hearing at the end of the story is that before they parted ways, he gave Bigfoot a handy.
Exactly.
That wasn't in the story.
Giving me a knobber.
I think
he had a bowl of popcorn with a whole cut of the bottle.
Yeah, that was a different story there. There is a book called Psychic Sasquatch that you guys can look up. You can purchase it on Kindle. You can buy a hard copy. It is a phenomenal book. It's got a lot of stories by the author, Quinoa Lapsurities. I think that's his name. I think he's
like the little health food.
Quinwani. I think it's Quinwani.
Quinwani lapsuritis.
Lapsuritis.
Lapsuritis. Yeah. He needs to get that checked out. Thrombocytopenia?
Yeah, something like that. And the
artwork on the cover on this, by the way, is
it's pretty phenomenal. I love it.
It's a little disturbing.
Yeah, but he has here. This is his name. I'm sorry. This is it.
Thrombocytopenia.
Yeah, but he's a Bigfoot researcher. He's given a number of talks. And he's out there in the field doing certain things. And so he tries to collect as many stories about Bigfoot encounters as he can. And so one of the stories he did collect was from a woman who declined to go on record with her name about the encounter with Bigfoot that she had. But it took place back in the late 70s, early 80s. And she just goes by the name Mrs. Jones. But she had like a summer house out in a rural area, and she lived there with her husband. Her husband was working at the time, so she was mostly alone out there. And one evening, she was out on her porch, and she saw this large figure standing about 50 to maybe about 50 feet, 70 feet away, but she could only see like the upper part of the torso because it was standing like just over like a large or smallest shed. And she wasn't frightened. And next thing she knows, she heard a voice in her head, and the voice was asking, why do you keep that animal in a cage? Now, this woman would oftentimes be on the front porch sipping and drinking tea with her cat outside, and she kept her cat in a cage outside with her. And she wasn't startled at all. She was a little perplexed about where that voice was coming from. And she responded back just mentally saying, I keep my cat, which is my pet, in a cage because I don't want it to scurry off into the woods to be eaten by another animal. So at this point, she's pretty much sure that she's communicating with this Sasquatch type creature 50 to 70 feet away. But she's not really scared at this point. And she continues to communicate with this creature, and she has to articulate what certain words mean, like, because she was referencing winter. Well, the Sasquatch didn't understand winter, but it understood the time in which snow falls or the time where it gets really cold. It didn't understand what spring was. So she had to describe spring as the time when the snow on the ground melts. And so over the course of a few days, that's spread out over a few weeks, they developed a sort of a relationship. She didn't feel threatened by the Sasquatch, and the Sasquatch felt bold enough to keep communicating to her. And so over time, they developed this relationship, and during that time, there were some break-ins in the area. And one night, this woman was resting in her house. She heard some commotion out on her front porch, and she assumed it was these burglars coming to burgle her house. So she grabbed a gun and was getting ready to go confront these burglars when all of a sudden she heard this giant roar from outside, and then the screams of these guys running off. And at that point in time, she went out there, and the Bigfoot was kind of walking off, but they mentally communicated that he sensed that she was in trouble. He sensed that she was scared, so he came to her rescue. So the Bigfoot came by and scared off these criminals. At a later date, later on in the season, she witnessed what appeared to be UFOs hovering in the forest. And at the time, she just thought they were just kind of like weird lights. She didn't really know what they were. But the neighbors came over and they kind of chit-chatted back and forth, and the neighbors saw the lights in the forest too. So the next time the Bigfoot showed up, the woman asked about these lights in the woods. And she said, what are those lights in the woods, those UFOs? Do you know anything about them? And the Bigfoot said, you don't need to know about those. Don't worry about those. And so she's like, oh, okay. So a couple years passed, and they kind of lost contact because development in the area just kind of ramped up. So more people were building houses around there. So the Bigfoot and Sasquatch migrated away. But she did go back to the woods one more time to try to contact her friend, and she saw what was the Bigfoot and was mentally communicating with it just for a few seconds in the woods. And then it dematerialized right in front of her. Like it went invisible right in front of her. And he says he was moving on and maybe someday he would see her again. And that startled her. And it's like, oh, I didn't know Bigfoot was invisible. But apparently they are to her. Now, this guy in the book, Kiwanzi, is it Kiwani? I think it's Kiwani. He also goes into various detail about himself going out and hunting Bigfoot. He uses various methods to doing that, ranging from like psychics to just historical data and personal accounts. He has a section in this book called Bigfoot and the CIA, which is a compelling kind of story in and of itself. I won't get into it here. But he did say this. So I tracked down like a talk from the author of the book. And as I said, he tries to congregate with like-minded people. He collects stories. And he invited some friends over to his personal house to maybe experience some Bigfoot activity. Because some people are just curious. They never experienced it, or they believe him, but they still want to experience Bigfoot activity for himself. So here is a little clip from the author talking about Bigfoot. Here we go.
They built a portal 125 feet from my front door.
So he's talking about Bigfoot right there. He is saying that Bigfoot or Big Feet built a portal 125 feet from his front door.
They built a portal 125 feet from my front door. And so they would come in and out, so they were there all the time. And sometimes they'd wake me up at night and just say hello. They were walking through from someplace else on their way to the portal, and they would just tell me hello, wake me up, and I'd say, oh, it's you, hi, God bless you, and just roll over and go back to sleep. So I told this person they're there. She said, oh, no, they're not here. That's ridiculous. I said, of course they are. I mean, I explained, but for whatever reason, she didn't believe me. And so I thought that was odd, because she had had experiences before. Not many, but she had some, and the telepathy as well. So the last night there, I said to them, would you please come inside tonight and make some noise or do something to let my friend know that you're here, you're really here. And they said they would, because there were two teenagers in the group of the clan that was there, and they liked doing stuff like that, So I went to bed, and I fell right to sleep. I woke up the next morning, and I walked down the steps from the loft, and my friend sat up in bed and said, hey, on the couch there, and said, gee, what a night that was, huh? And I said, why, what happened? She said, well, you know what happened. She says, they were stomping all through here, down here. Her dog was growling, and she went up in the loft and was making one hell of a noise. And she says, I know they're here. And she said, but it must have woke you up. I said, I didn't hear anything. What they do is they made sure I stayed asleep. They have that power to keep you asleep or put you to sleep. So they did, so I could rest, and it wasn't my thing. I didn't need to hear them, but she did, and she said, okay, they're here. I believe you,
So it may sound wacky to some people, probably a good majority of people out there. Just hold on to that thought and what he said there about portals and putting people to sleep. Because a lot of what he is stating there also applies to the ET phenomenon. And then throughout this book, he does reference quite a bit and talk about how the Bigfoot and Sasquatch work hand in hand with ETs for various assignments. Essentially, he calls them foot soldiers. Is something that we have speculated about a number of times in this show. That these Bigfoot, at least a certain segment of the population, maybe not all of them, but a certain part of the Bigfoot population do work in conjunction with ETs or some non-terrestrial entity that is hyper-intelligent and has access to technology. They guard areas. They are basically the reconnaissance for these aliens and can do manual labor. The telepathy angle, it's probably pretty weird. If you just picture these Bigfoot as like a big giant ape, they're not telepathic, but this book goes into a deeper kind of lore about it, that they're not really from this dimension and have various methods of traveling and kind of phasing in and out of this dimension for us to see. Now, what he did say in his book with one of the stories in reference to UFOs is that there was a family in the mid-'80s that did go camping at a certain location over the course of a few years, and they got pretty comfortable with the fact that this area was inhabited by Bigfoot. And they went out into the woods. They kind of posted up and kind of hunkered down for a few hours, and they saw a bunch of Bigfoot come out of the woods carrying this weird object that looked like a flashlight, shine it up into the sky, make a howling noise, and UFOs appeared, and they appeared to interact in some way. And so that caught the attention of this author and some other people. But when it comes to the portal aspect of it all, I will play this little segment from George Knapp. So in the previous segment, the author of Psychic Bigfoot said the Bigfoot they created a portal right 100 feet away from my house. But in this next segment by George Knapp, he talks of a portal on Skinwalker Ranch, and this is well documented. This was documented during the whole NIDS investigation of Skinwalker Ranch when Bigelow owned the place, and they were recording everything they could. And so this is written down, and they have various testimonies that this event did happen. So here is George Knapp recounting the story.
These are world-class guys who saw this stuff. They had an incident where they got two guys up on Skinwalker Ridge who are sort of watching with infrared and telescopes, and then two other guys are down below. And the guys who are below see this like a dirty snowball of yellow light hanging maybe a foot off the ground in the middle pasture, George plastic chair pasture. And it's getting bigger and bigger, and they're talking on the walkie-talkie to the guys upstairs, and they say, up on the ridge, and they say, "Can you see this thing?" "Yeah, we're watching it." And this ball starts getting bigger, and then it kind of gets elongated until it looks like a tunnel. "And you guys still watching this?" "Yeah." And the guys with the infrared said, "Hey, there's something inside this thing." And sure enough, this large humanoid-looking creature starts wriggling through the tunnel from one side, trying to get to the other, as if it's coming from somewhere else. And it gets to the end of this tunnel of light. It stands up. It's like 8 feet tall, black, featureless, and it jumps out. The tunnel collapses on itself and goes away. And this big thing, starts running up Skinwalker Ridge. The guys are up there. Just about had to change their underwear, because they're thinking it's coming up after them, and it didn't. It just went poof. I mean, these guys didn't make this stuff up. I mean, they had these experiences themselves.
So in conjunction with everything you talked about, it's like I take that as what actually was seen there. That there was some sort of portal, some sort of creature came out of it and ran up and was unable to be tracked by the scientists and the people at the Skinwalker Ranch. So we have some commonalities here between a lot of some missing 411 cases, UFO incidents, portals, and UFOs. Like the missing 411 stuff, oftentimes that when you go out hiking with a group of people, sometimes the people in the back of the group will get a headache. They'll start to not feel well. They will start to just not want to participate in the rest of the hike, in which time they will turn around and try to go back to their car or campsite, and that's the last time anyone ever sees them. That kind of correlates to telepathic Bigfoot and what they're able to do with their mind. The portal stuff, David Paulides has talked about that a little bit. He doesn't talk about portals really too much in relation to missing 411, but he did talk about it here, and I did capture this. This is from January 2020, before the pandemic hit, and this is David Paulides talking about portals in relation to Bigfoot. So here we go.
Now, Bruce Maccabee is a physicist that's done a lot of work for MUFON. I consider him a really good friend. He was in our second movie. He's an expert with photo analysis. Expert, probably the best in the world. He sent me this photo. And if you can see at the top, there's a little orange. And down here, this is an eye. And what happened is a deer walked up to a game camera and triggered it. But this is facing the west. And it was taken at 5 in the morning. So it couldn't have been the sun climbing up for that orange. This is a photo of the top side. There's a conical head, and it's really hard to see in this, but there's also 2 eyes there. And I asked Bruce, what in the heck is that? He says, Dave, this matches about 5 or 6 photos that were sent to me, like a portal opening up and an orange horizon in the background. Folks, very similar to what was seen at Skinwalker Ranch by retired FBI agents when a portal opened up above the horizon on the land, and they saw Bigfoot crawl out of the window frame and jump down onto the land. There was this orange background.
So there's David Paulides talking about portals. So where does this all lead to? I think in 2022, we're going to see big stories about Bigfoot. I think this is where it's all leading to. Portal conversation is not going to come into it, but I'm seeing these headlines, like the headline right here: new Bigfoot footage has experts admitting it could be real, and then a second one, apparently Bigfoot lives in this cage. You have to sign a waiver to visit them. So, I think there's going to be some real Bigfoot fever hitting, and it's going to fall right in conjunction. Like the mainstream media is not going to make the connection between Bigfoot and ET, but it's going to be there. But I think Bigfoot news 2022, big time. What do you think about that?
Any way we can tie Bigfoot into COVID somehow?
I don't immediately know. Maybe.
We could do that, then Bigfoot's on the news all the time.
Oh, right.
What if Bigfoot came through the portal with COVID and that was the animal that they still can't find?
Possibly.
I do want to point out that, of course, the guys from Skinwalker Ranch don't have footage of any of this stuff happening because their phone doesn't work.
Well, I think with Skinwalker Ranch, that was done back in the 90s. I think there is footage. There's a lot
their
of
phone.
There's a lot of documentation. It's just Bigelow hasn't released it or hasn't released it to the public. So there is testimony, there's affidavits, there is some data here and there, there's some photograph, but when it comes to like that infrared camera that they were using, that footage, I don't think it's ever been seen. Not by the public.
The phone's correct.
So there's some psychic Bigfoot stuff. And apparently, according to the author of Psychic Bigfoot, Psychic Sasquatch, the CIA knows all this stuff, and they want to know what other people do when they encounter Bigfoot. They want to know how that happens, what they see, and the CIA will send people to tail people, harass them, and generally threaten them.
Some people fall in love with Bigfoot. Sometimes Bigfoot gives people knobbers.
Giving me a knobber.
They go through portals. He can give you a handy through the portal.
Well, I mean,
that's a good point, Joe. There was a story that we just heard with the Bigfoots knock a guy out while he's sleeping to keep him asleep. So what are they doing to you when you're sleeping?
Well, I mean, we don't want to assume too many bad things about the Bigfoot here.
You said they're teenagers. They like to do that. So they go in your house, they knock you out, they force knobbers, and who knows what else.
Can you really force a knobber? I mean,
giving me a knobber.
Haven't you heard the ads for Blue Chew yet?
I guess you can. Yeah, I guess you can. So the CIA is tracking this all. I'll bring up some more stories about Bigfoot in the future. But
Bigfoot in the future. Oh, it's the best.
Future Bigfoot. But this is, for whatever reason, I just dove down the Bigfoot hole and just fascinated by all this stuff and all these personal accounts. And it goes a lot deeper with some of these communications. And for instance, like the other side, what's on the other side of the portal? People want to know. Well, apparently on the other side of the portal, it's not unlike here on Earth. It's green. It's got trees and grass and forest. It's got animals, and it's got its own people over there. It's just that this is a different realm, and over there is a different realm, and they travel between the two.
Can we put our carbon in there?
Can you put what in there?
Put our carbon in there. Remember last show we were talking about
we need to store our carbon.
Yeah. What if we just store it through the portal?
Well, I think these kind of technologies, if discovered, would be the solution to all these crises that tend to occur, especially when it comes to climate change. If they believe this is a real crisis, the only real answer is UFO technology. When you come to 0-point energy and all this kind of, resource scarcity that we're dealing with right now, hey, get rid of that. We can have a Star Trek future and not have to worry about all this crap. But no.
Maybe that's what the replicators are. It's just they're mini portals. And on the other side, they got people over there making food all the time.
You're just taking other people's food from a different dimension?
Well, it's what I would do if I had that sort of technology.
Sure.
He's going to bring a sandwich through the portal.
That's why I want my sandwich. Somebody ate my sandwich.
Your interdimensional sandwich made by Bigfoot.
Made by Bigfoot. This is a Bigfoot sandwich.
By the fifth dimensional Quiznos.
It's got some mud on it. There's a stick in here. Terrible Bigfoot. It's all full of hair.
Give us an email at ourbigdumbmouth@gmail.com. Check out obdmpod.com for all the social media and donation links. Be a part of the magic.